The first picture, and I'm not sure how to do that. I guess I need to go to play. That's not the picture I want. Pastor, where are you? I was supposed to have the pictures right here and I don't have them. Garrett, what happened? Sorry, everybody. The pictures were supposed to be right here. I pushed that, nothing happened. Okay, I want to go.
Which way you want to go?
The other way, the other way. That one.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm ready to start. Thank you. I need all the help I can get. Anyway, I just thank everybody that is here and those that are in Zoom watching, and it just does my heart good to be here this morning and talk to you about my mom. But before I go into her story, I want to make a few disclaimers. And first is that I'm a little nervous, as you can expect, so bear with me. And as I go through the story, there's a lot of questions, a lot of things that I don't know about my mom. There's a lot of gaps about her and her life, how she passed away. I mean, I know how she passed away, but the little details. I was very young when my mom died. I was only 5 years old. So my recollection is very, very minimal. I don't remember her face. All I know is from pictures. And that's my mom that you're seeing up on the screen right now. I don't know when this was taken, but anyway, my sister's here with me, one of my sisters, and she was even younger than I was. So I'm sure she doesn't remember mom either. Otherwise I would have her up here filling in some of the gaps. Anyway, gee, where do I start? I want to start out by saying that, you know, when my mom died, I said I was very young, but the reason why I don't know a lot about her is because my relatives, including my dad, didn't talk about her. I'm not really sure why. As I go through the story, I hope you will understand and figure out what the conclusions that I have come up with. I think maybe some of it was guilt. Some of it was painful, I'm sure. And maybe some of it was that they wanted to spare us, my sisters and me, from pain, from, you know. And I think also in those days, and I'm talking about 1950, children were kind of kept in the dark. You know, if there was anything painful going on, they were kind of excluded from that.
They were seen, not heard.
Well, that's true. Thank you, Weldon. So, you know, one of the things, and being a hospice nurse, one of the things that I have learned is that you do not exclude children from death is part of life. And even though it's painful and we don't understand it, it's healing to be able to participate in that process. And I wish I had had that. And for me, it's just been, you know, painful. And I'm hoping as I go through her story, it will bring some healing to me and my sisters and help me to understand her life better. It's a story that I have had in my heart for a few years now. And I wanted to share it, and it's just been nagging at me and nagging at me. And my granddaughter, who was visiting me here last year, a few months ago, I says, maybe you can help me write a book about Mom. So I think this is just the beginning. I think this will kind of hopefully will lead up to that. I'm hoping I will be able to gather more information as time goes on so that the book will not be very short, you know. So anyway, where do I start? Well, I've already talked about, being the fact that it'll bring closure to me and healing and all of that. And, but understand that it was her faith that led to her death. We think of martyrs as being, people that were burned at the stake or crucified, that was not the cause of her death. But because of her faith, she died. So I consider her a martyr. She was approximately 35 years of age. She died in childbirth, and as I go through the story, all of that will be more clear to you, I hope. Did I hear somebody say something? Okay. Sorry, Garrett.
All right.
Okay, I probably touched it accidentally. So, as I said, I'm not a public speaker, but anyway, here we go. To the best of my knowledge, my mom was born around 1915, 1916. I'm not 100% sure, I'm just kind of guessing. She was born around the time, and this is in Mexico, in a little town of Allende, Nuevo León. And later on, I'm going to show you a picture of kind of like a little map, a rough map of where that area is at. It's just south of the border in Texas. That little town is called Allende in the state of Nuevo León. And Nuevo León is one of the northern states of Mexico. The capital of Nuevo León is Monterrey, which I think some of you have probably heard. And this little town, at that time, it was really more like a village, but now it's a town or a city. It's about 20 miles south of Monterrey. And then further south is another town that you probably have even heard about, and it's Montemorelos. Montemorelos has a very large Adventist presence there. There's a college, a university, and even a medical school. So there's a lot of Adventists there. Now, that doesn't mean that my parents were Adventists at that time, but I just want to kind of give you an idea as to what we're talking about. My mom was born around the time of Pancho Villa. I think some of you have heard of this bad hombre. He was very well known in that area. I understand that my grandmother, and I'll show you a picture of my grandmother later, whenever Pancho Villa came to town, my grandmother would feed him and his man. So, I got a little shady history there from my ancestors, but anyway, that's the way it was at that time, so we cannot judge for what they did. That was normal for them. My grandmother, and I learned this many, many years later, she had, besides my mom, my grandmother had my mom and several other children, and they were all illegitimate. She was the mistress of a very prominent man in town. And again, this was kind of like, you don't talk about this, but that's where I come from, So as time goes on, I don't know anything about my mom's childhood, how she was raised. I do remember some of my uncles and aunts that were her brothers and her sisters, and they all have passed away. I still have cousins from those, my mom's siblings, that some of them I still keep in touch with, by very, very seldom, but I know that they're still there. My mom and dad got married around 1941. So that was around, World War II was going on at that time. I don't know how much, I don't think Mexico was that involved in the war, other than they just knew that it was happening. And then my oldest sister, Hilda, which I will show you a picture again of her later, along with my other sisters. She was born in 1941, that same year, later in the year. And then I was born in 1945, so a few years later. But before, no, let me back off a little bit. I did find out years later, I don't know if it was from my grandma or one of my cousins. Anyway, somebody told me, and I believe this is true, there was another girl that was born between Hilda and me, but she died a few months after she was born. So I don't even know what her name was or anything about her. When I was around 2 years old, I would say in 1947, something like that, my parents came to the United States, to Texas. And they came here illegally at that time. I'm not illegal anymore, but I was when I was very young. So I just went where my parents went. We went to a little town in Texas by the name of San Benito, which is in the Rio Grande Valley. And, Rio Grande Valley is in the news a lot these days. You can see what's happening down there. This little town is about 20 miles north of the border between Mexico and Texas. It's about as far south as you can get. When my parents came, they were actually being helped by some relatives that we had there not in the town of San Benito, but on the outskirts, out of town. My father's relatives, I think they were his cousins. They were both farmers, cotton farmers. And so they were able to provide my dad with a job and a home to live, and also to give him a lot of support with, to make a living for him, mom, and his two daughters. These relatives were very devout Christians, Pentecostal Christians. And my mom, who had a Catholic background from where she came from, and I believe my dad too, converted to that same faith. And my mom took her faith very seriously. I mean, she took it in her heart. And as I go on, you'll see what happened. Then my sister Esther, who's sitting here in the audience, was born while we were in Texas in 1948. So she was born here. Of all my sisters, she's the only one that was born here. Sometime soon after Esther was born, my parents with the family returned to Mexico. I don't know why the circumstances were. All I know is that the plan was for them to return, for my dad to start the process to immigrate and get the visa and immigrate back to the United States legally. And that's where things were at when they went back to Mexico. My dad at that time was a long distance truck driver. You know, you see those big semi trucks on the road hauling supplies and food and other items. And his trips would take him away from home many, many days at a time. His route was primarily between Monterrey and Mexico City, which is a few hundred miles away, maybe 1,000. I don't know, I didn't look it up. But I know that he would be gone because he would haul one way and then wait for another load to come back. So this was his job. And my mom was left alone at home with three girls now. As I mentioned earlier, my mom had been Catholic, and the town of Allende was very Catholic. The whole town pretty much was Catholic. And the neighbors did not take very well to my mom now being a Protestant Christian. And consequently, they made life for her very, very difficult. They ostracized her. They considered her a heretic for converting to Protestantism. And my dad, you know, being gone, of course, when he came home, he realized what was happening. And so he was hoping or making sure that the process to immigrate would get expedited, would happen sooner rather than later, so that he could get a mom away from that environment and us girls. And you know, he wanted a better life for his family and us girls. So that's kind of where things were at that time. And this is around 1949. I'm sure because of what mom was going through at that time, that probably even strengthened her faith even more so. And I don't know where my relatives, my grandmother and other relatives were with that. I would like to think that they did not do the same thing that the neighbors did. To the best of my knowledge, they didn't, you know, even though maybe they didn't understand it. So my mom got pregnant with the fourth child in 1949. And my dad continued on his job, being gone a few days at a time, knowing what was happening at home. But he needed to provide, you know, for family. So he couldn't be there, you know, as much as he wanted to. He became, I'm sure he was concerned that she not have the baby by herself while he was going on one of his trips. And so they took her, they had her being checked by a doctor. And the doctor assured my dad and my mom that the baby was not going to be due for another few weeks. So it was okay for my dad to go on his trip and return in time by the time the baby came. So he went on his trip, you know, with the assurance that things were going to be okay. And my uncle, we had an uncle who was my father's brother that lived just about a block from our house. And my uncle and aunt, you know, were asked to kind of keep an eye on mom and my girls, not just this one trip, but pretty much all the time. So unfortunately, mom went into labor. prematurely. And of course, my dad was gone at that time. You know, communication in Mexico in 1950 was very minimal. You know, phones were rare. And my dad being on the road, there was no way they could, you know, communicate with him. So my mom went into labor, and I understand from my oldest sister Hilda, who was 8 at that time, that I guess it happened during the night, in the middle of the night. And my mom, you know, being alone, she knew she couldn't turn to her neighbors for help because they pretty much had made it clear that they would not lift a finger to help her. And so what was she to do? She asked my oldest sister, Hilda, in the dark to go to my uncle's house and then to go and fetch my grandma, who happened to live across town. For us, I remember is like thinking it was miles and miles and miles away. You know, when you're little, everything seems bigger, longer, you know. But as an adult, when I've gone back to this little town, it was only maybe about a mile. But everywhere you went, you walked. That was what we did, you know. And so my uncle went to fetch my grandma, you know, to tell her that mom was in labor and needed some help. My grandma went to get the doctor, and the doctor was one of the few people in town who had a car. So he and grandma drove to the house. When they got there, by then it was early morning hours. My mom had already delivered my youngest sister, Mary. And the doctor could see that my mom was in trouble. She was hemorrhaging severely. And there wasn't really, you know, primitive conditions in a house rather than a hospital. There wasn't really a whole lot that he could do. And I was told, or I've been told, that apparently the doctor took some of his own blood and was going to give it to mom to help save her, you know. But it was too late. My mom passed away. But my little sister Mary lived. So, you know, it's hard to talk about this because I just remember I have a very vague recollection. You know, in those days in Mexico, people were buried 1 or 2 days afterwards. Only the very rich could afford the preservation process, embalming or whatever you want to call it, you know. So the poor, you know, you died and 1 or 2 days later, well, they placed you, I think, at home. I remember mom being laid out at home. And I remember somebody lifting me up and for me to be able to look into the casket. I don't know who it was. I don't remember even seeing my mom. I just remember being lifted up and looking at her casket. I'm sorry, let me get a tissue. Thank you for bearing with me. My dad came back from his trip, and I guess he didn't know until he actually got back to Monterey. The message got to him to come home as soon as possible. He didn't know why. So between Monterey and Allende, you know, it's like 20 miles, I think, 20, 30 miles, you know. by the time he could come back into town, my mom was already gone and already buried. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it was so painful for him to talk about it. Maybe he felt guilt for not being there. Anyway, I wish I had been more assertive and asked my dad, hey, tell us about mom. But it is what it is. And the little bit that I know, I've learned from my aunts and uncles and cousins, you know, who knew mom, knew the circumstances of her death. So what was dad to do with 3 young girls, ages 8 years old to a newborn? And he was on the road most of the time. He was away from home more than he was at home. He asked my grandmother if she could take us in, which she did. You know, we cannot judge people for my grandma's circumstances and all that, but I would like to think that she was a saint. I mean, what woman will take 3 young girls, including 4, including a newborn, to care for, you know? And my mother's mother, my father's mother had passed away long before I was born, so I never knew her. So this was my mom's mom. So we went to live with grandma. I don't remember that time, but a year later, my dad remarried to my stepmom. And he kind of had to start the process all over again for the immigration, because now it was a different person in the picture, you know, my stepmom. And so we immigrated back to the United States in 1954 with a visa. And I was hoping I'd have a picture of the visa, because it has my dad, my stepmom, Hilda, and me, and my oldest half-brother. I don't want to go into that part of the story about, you know, my life in Texas and all that, because my story today is about mom and what happened to her. Let me go through some pictures here. I wasn't sure how I could incorporate them into the talk, so I thought I'll just save them for later, and I'll just kind of tell you who you're going to look at, who you're seeing. Of course, you see mom on the first picture. Okay. Here's 2 more pictures of mom. Well, one of them is the same that you're seeing up there. The other one on the left, well, yeah, on the left to you, that's her wedding picture, and unfortunately, it's not a very good picture. It was, I guess, damaged through the years. Yeah, you know, of all my sisters, my relatives have said I'm the one that looks the most like mom. And I feel good about that. Yeah, so she had the same eyes that I do, you know. I know she was about 2 or 3 years older than my dad. Because my dad was born in 1918. And she was, you know, as I said, hers was 1915, 1916. Oh, Domitila Elizondo. Yeah, Domitila. Don't ask me what it is in English because I don't think there's a pronunciation. And Elizondo was really the name of her father, you know, because as I said, she was born illegitimate, but she took my grandmother gave her dad's name. My grandmother, I'll show you a picture of her in a minute. Her last name was Aguilar, which is also a very common Mexican name or Spanish name. I got a couple of pictures of my dad here. He was very handsome, very tall. He had blue eyes. The little town of Allende was primarily Spanish, a lot of immigrants from Spain. And so I think there were more Spanish in the town than there was native Mexican natives, you know. But I do have a combination of Spanish and French and Mexican Indian. I don't know what percentage, but I know it's there. This is a copy of Mom and Dad's marriage certificate. And then on the, I have to look at the screen. The one on the right is I guess it's the original, the one that one of my sisters, Mary, obtained. And the other one is the translation in English. She had somebody translate it in English. This is a picture of my dad and my mom's wedding. And you can see it's the same picture of that I showed you earlier. And unfortunately, my dad, his picture was also damaged a little bit because of the, I guess my stepmom was the one that had these pictures and they were not very well taken care of. If we had them, I think we would have appreciated them more. My sisters and I have talked about restoring some of these pictures because I know nowadays with the technology that we have, we can do that. Here's another picture of my mom and my oldest sister, Hilda. Yeah, I think Hilda must have been around 4 or 5. I'm not really sure what year that was taken. This is the little town of Allende. You can just kind of see a little bit with the mountains in the background. And then on the insert, you will see the picture. Texas is right up above where you see Harlingen and Matamoros. I think Susan here, I understand she's from Matamoros. And that's a different state. That's the state of Tamaulipas. And Tamaulipas is right next to Nuevo León. And Monterrey is southwest of Texas. And then further down, you see Montemorelos. And the little town of Allende is kind of halfway in between those two cities, just to kind of give you an idea as to where. And of course, the blue area is the Gulf of Mexico. That's where I was raised. I was actually raised in Texas. This is one of the Catholic churches in town. I believe this is the church where my parents married and where I was baptized, because I was baptized Catholic. One of these days, I need to get a copy of my birth certificate. I don't have a birth certificate, but I know I was born because I'm here. This is the little town, the town hall of Allende. And that was there years ago, and it's still there today, to the best of my knowledge. At the top of where Grandma lived, there was a little hill, and there was a cross up there. And we used to go up there to play all the time, and it was called the Santa Cruz. And in English, it's a Holy Cross. And that's still, it's still there. Remember when we were living with Grandma, or we would go visit Grandma, we would walk up that hill, and it was kind of like a dirt path. Now there's actually stairs all the way up. I was kind of like, the last time I was there was what, 22 years ago? And I went up there and there were stairs all the way up there. And you have to take a breath every few steps. But anyway, that's a very prominent, this cross of the town. This is the only picture that I have of Grandma. She's the one in the bed, the little lady with covered. And she was already bedridden, and it was really maybe a year before she passed away. She passed away in, what was it, 68, 69, sis? 69, yeah. Now, you will see Esther's in the picture there, behind the little girl with a red coat. The little girl with the red coat is my niece, Deborah. And Esther behind her, then another cousin behind Grandma, and then my uncle Arturo and his wife, Herminia. And I think Hilda probably took this picture, huh? Yeah. I don't really know. All I know is that she was up in years when she passed away. Huh? Okay. I know that she was, up in years. She was born in the 1800s, but I'm not really sure. Maybe my cousins in Mexico probably know the exact year. I just thought I'd show this picture for fun. But it's misspelled. I'm sorry. It's not Poncho, it's Pancho. You can see he was a bandolero with all his, what do you call that? The bullets. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd show this picture for fun because he lived during that time. Yeah, he was Grandma's friend, or she would make tamales for him, and yeah, she would make tortillas for them and cook. I don't know how many men, but when he came into town, he had a whole gang with him, and Mexicans, especially the poor people, he was kind of like a revolutionary. I can't say it. Revolutionary. He was against the president of Mexico at that time, Madera. He wanted to overthrow him, but some of the bad things he did, he would go into Texas and raid and kill people, so Americans didn't think very highly of him. And last but not least, I just wanted to show you a picture of me and my sisters. This was taken about 30 years ago. Hilda is at the top to my left. I'm next to her. And then Esther and Mary. Yeah. I would like to think that I know some of my sisters are in Zoom right now, and I honestly don't know how to bring them up. And my daughter and my granddaughter are also in Zoom. Is there some way you can do that, Pastor? Can you see Claudia Solt on Zoom? Yeah. How about Madison Faulkner? That's my granddaughter. Yeah. I sent the link to them and some of my cousins and my sisters because I was hoping I'd be able to bring them up. And anyway. Well, if we can't, we can't. But if you're there, can you make yourself known?
Not sure if you can hear me, but hi, Mom.
Claudia Solt is my daughter. She said she was gonna. Okay.
Not sure if you can hear us too, but your grandniece and or your grandnephew and your niece are on as well.
And Madison Faulkner is my granddaughter. Maybe you can, those that I just mentioned, my niece, Deborah, my sister Mary, if you're on, maybe you can unmute yourself and video. And Olivia, my other niece. There's Claudia Solt, I guess she's not on video. Oh, well, I tried. They can hear me, and that's the important thing. But I wanted to see them too. Okay, I'm just going to wrap things up. The purpose why I wanted to, tell the story in conjunction with the Sabbath School quarterly that we have been studying this past quarter, it's about resting in Jesus. And I have no doubt in my heart, because of my faith and my mom's faith, that she's resting in Jesus. And she will, I will get to see her again. I will get to know her, meet her, talk to her, fill in the gaps. And I would like to finish by reading. Let me pick up my Bible. This is from the New Living Bible, one of the translations that I like. I think you're all familiar with this verse. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. If you want to follow along, if you don't have a Bible, there's one in front of you in the pew. I'll give you a minute to turn to that passage. Okay. So starting with verse 16. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a mighty shout, with a soul-stirring cry of the archangel, and the great trumpet call of God. And the believers who are dead will be first to rise to meet the Lord. then we will be caught up with them in the clouds with him forever. Let me reread that. Then we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air and remain with him forever. So comfort and encourage each other with this news. Thank you for bearing with me, but it has been my pleasure to share what was in my heart this morning. May God bless you all.